Hello and welcome to the much delayed Oulton Park BTCC review. But we're here now, so without further ado, I'm going to waste no time. It should be a shorter video anyway, this one, because despite the guest support with the pre-83 touring cars and the no, not the Caterhams, the Scottish Legends, I won't be focusing on them, so I'll just do touring cars, Sprint Challenge, and Mini JCW. So let's get straight into the touring cars. Okay, then qualifying Group 1, and Dan Camish has had a bit of a steady but unspectacular start to the season prior to Oulton Park. This was a good way to end the first half of the season for Dan, no doubt. So he topped Quali Group 1, followed by Josh Cook. Good to see him back up the sharp end. And Sutton, Ingram, Moffat, Flash, Dan Robo, Chris Smiley, Lewis Selby, and Ricky Collard. Ricky having a off at Cascades early on in the session, just put him on the back foot, unfortunately. So a below par performance there for Ricky. Thankfully, though, it does sound like we're going to have him in for the second half of the season. I know that going into the break, he was uncertain of his future in the car for the remainder of the year, but it's looking like that will be sorted. However, nothing's confirmed with this yet, but I have heard rumours that Japanese reserve driver Osamu Kawashima is rumoured to be doing rounds 9 and 10. We don't know instead of who yet. I would suggest it would be Ricky Collard. But I'm excited to see a foreign driver on the grid. I've been saying to my dad, you know, really what I want to see now in touring cars is some foreign drivers taking up, particularly from GT racing. I think some European GT drivers, they are some of the best drivers out there. And let's look at, I don't know, Maro Engel, people like that, right? Marvin Kirchhoffer, Sven Muller, any driver out there like that, I would just love it. Even if they just did the odd round, just to come in and just get their elbows out, stuck into the touring car regulars, I think it'd be brilliant. So hopefully this Japanese guy is fast. I'm sure he's no slouch being a Virtue Reserve driver for this season anyway. So it would be good to see him. It would definitely be very good to see him. Now here's a bit of trivia. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think when the last time we had a foreign driver, and I believe it was actually a Swedish guy called Dennis Strandberg, and I think he did he sit in for Croft back in about 2017, something like that. That's off the top of my head. I remember weird things like that. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that is the last time we had a foreign driver. That's a long time ago. So this would be fantastic to see. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent. Quali Group 2, Aaron Taylor-Smith, my word, how his weekend would unfold from here. Then Mikey Doble and Dexter Patterson, the two Audis. Now, of course, from Knock Hill, they're going to be extended to the 4-car outfit with Nick Howstead. Tom Chilton 4th and Adam Morden 5th. Sam Osborne 6th. James Dorlin, Charles Rainford, Dowd Leon and Nick Hamilton. A really poor qualifying session for both BMWs. Another team that are going to be extending out to a 3-car outfit with GB3 driver Lewis Gilbert, who I don't know much about, apart from the fact that he's done GB3 this season. So a massive learning curve for him. I look forward to seeing how he gets on at Thruxton. Max Buxton was absent on the Saturday due to illness, but being the trooper he is, got in the car for Sunday and flung it around like he always would. Quali race then, and ATS would obviously receive that penalty for weaving after the safety car lights went out. Aaron, man, I know you're not used to doing safety car restarts, but the rules have always been there. So just clumsy from Aaron. Gives Dan Camish the win from Cook, from Sutton and Ingram. Taylor Smith down to 5th in the end after that. And Mikey, then Adam Morden, Dexter Patterson, Adam Moffat, and Chris Smiley. Nice little top 10 for restart racing there, and all 3 of the Power Maxed Audis in there as well. It's worth mentioning a couple of incidents then. It's very lively. Every qualifying race this season has been very lively. I cannot wait for the Thruxton one. The earliest incident then was Tom Chilton, wasn't it? Down to the hairpin. It's sensible to move to the outside as they all stack up on the inside. But Morgan had already done so, so as Chilton went to do the same, his rear met the front of Morgan's Mercedes. It's just a racing incident, really. And yeah, Chilton got spat out onto the island part of the track. Then Nick Hamilton, a couple laps later, going over. There's a little bump in the road as you hit the brakes for the hairpin. And yeah, he locked up going over the bump and 90 degrees left into the barriers. Decent bit of damage. Nick was alright though. Walked away fine. But yeah, that was the end of his race right there. Sutton and Ingram, my word, Hammer and Tons comes to mind with this. They made contact at Lodge Ingram wild into the back of Sutton, and then coming down the the front stretch into Old Hall Corner, Ingram somehow was, going at half the speed, I don't know, he usually would, on the inside to allow Sutton back through, and he kept everyone at bay. He had Mikey Doble, he's the front end of his Audi, pretty much pushing him all the way through the straight, and kept him at bay. But then in doing so, that stacked them all up, and Sam Osborne got spat out of line into the infield going down through Dentons and Cascades. We've seen nasty accidents there over the years. I think Jim Louts in the mini challenge, most notably a few years back when Oulton Park was just a mental weekend. He tobogganed his way down the grass, came back on in front of the pair of restart Hyundais, and was very lucky not to be collected. I can only imagine how scary it is for not only Sam but also the two restart guys. That you're just watching the car spear out of control to the left of you, and you've got to try and judge where he's going to come back on and when. Let's go on to race one then. And Camish converted his pole into a win, with Cut following him home. Then Ingram, Taylor Smith, Moffat, Doble, Sutton, Chilton, Smiley, and De Leon. So that was Dan Cam's maiden 2026 win. As I said, unspectacular, but he's always quick, isn't he? Dan, he's had some bad luck. Brands was a horrible weekend for him. The weekend where conditions were just, the weather couldn't make its mind up. So yeah, it's good to see Dan Cam on the top step again, where he belongs. He was saying as well, it's been a long time coming this season. It's good to go into the break on a high, but at the same time, finally you pick up some momentum, and then it stalls as you have the break. So you can look at it two ways. And being Dan, he's probably looked at it more than negative. But I hope he's able to take some positives from that going into Thruxton now. Instant time again. Sutton and Cook on lap one. Cascades. Sutton made a start as you'd expect. On the outside into Cascades, and Cook on the inside has a little oversteer moment. Has to correct it, and in doing so, corrects it into Sutton. It's very similar to the Russell and Hamilton incident at Spa that's just happened in the F1. Yeah, both drivers were more than happy to call it a racing incident. Yeah, it was unfortunate, but Sutton, this was the start of a bit of a rough up, really, for him. Not too long after that incident, you had Dexter Patterson and Lewis Selby come together, exit to Druids, run down to Lodge. Patterson went wide at Druids, comes back on, squeezes Selby onto the grass, and then this is a carbon copy, really, of Sutton and Ingram at Donington in the first quali race of the year. 2 wheels on the grass, and Selby is just spat onto the other side of the road. Nothing he could do about it. A bit of a clang with the barrier. That ended his race on the spot. First time this year that the drivers were on the soft and the hard tyre. No mediums, it was the two extremes. So that would produce for some great racing, especially at Oulton when you've got corks in the bottle and drivers need to pass very quickly. This one was probably the best race performance I'd seen for a Plato racing car in Adam Morgan. He was really in the mix. He was that sort of 5th and 6th area. He was battling with Doble and Sutton and really holding his own. But it was some sort of, I don't know, it was a misfire or something like that. But the car just conked out. But in that battle that he was in, Doble and Sutton were really going at it. A couple of times Sutton would, try his usual audacious manoeuvres. And I always say, yes, Sutton is pretty much unstoppable because he is the best driver on the grid. But as the driver defending for him, if you want to keep him at bay that much, you can. You will do anything. You will show him the edge of the road. You will put him on the grass. You will risk a penalty if you are really that adamant on getting one over on the multiple champion. You will. Drivers still, I think, showing that bit too much respect. However, on this instance, Mikey did not. Mikey was into his door at every opportunity, holding his line, making Sutton really, really work for it, and ultimately keeping him at bay. The amount of times Sutton would try a move and get knocked back by the brilliant defence from Mikey Doble, a man that goes very much, I think, under the radar, overlooked sometimes, does Mikey. Right from day one, he was quick. From the very first day he sat in a touring car, and he's just getting better and better. The Audi really seems to suit him and indeed the whole team. And it was brilliant. I think he would have been, he's not a man that gives much away, but I'd imagine he'd have been smiling under the helmet there, keeping Sutton at bay like he was. It was brilliant, and that's my drive of the weekend right there. Doble in race one. It was absolutely phenomenal from him. Who else to talk about? I think that's it for race one. We'll move on to race two, and it is back to winning ways for Ash Sutton. Back to normality. England followed him home in P2 with Camish in third, and Darrell de Leon in fourth. So a good result for WSR after a dismal Saturday. Doble fifth, yeah. Shedden sixth, when Collard seventh. Again, really good recovery drive there from Ricky in race two. Then Patterson, Rainford, and Osborne. Now I mentioned corking the bottle. Hard tyre versus soft tyre. Taylor Smith was on the hard in this one, and the corking the bottle has never been more an appropriate phrase because he was just stacking them all up. Chilton got a great exit coming out of Old Hall Corner. I think he was on the boost, went to the outside as ATS had covered the inside for that little right at Denton, so he could try and hang it round and get the inside for Cascades. ATS then moved back across to claim that line. Contact there in doing so, and it put two wheels of Chilton onto the grass coming down the hill in the most heart-stopping of moments. Yeah, pretty frightening. Again, very lucky. There's a multiple instance this weekend that could have ended up a lot worse. I think recent years touring cars has lost a bit of its edge. This season, I think it's back. We are seeing more incidents, which obviously isn't great for the drivers, but as a fan, we want to see the cars dance. We want to see the drivers push it to the absolute limit and go over the limit as well on the occasion. And yeah, we're seeing a bit more progression this season, which is great from a viewing perspective. And then another driver who I think is under the radar is Dexter Patterson, Doble's teammate, the young Scot. He just continues to impress. Again, there's not been a standout, immense result yet for Dexter. I think it could come in the second half of the season. Who's to say it wouldn't? Maybe, especially in a reverse grid, something like that. But I mean, did he get in the top 10 in race one? I can't remember. No, he didn't quite. Oh yeah, of course he was involved in that incident with Selby. But he got back-to-back eights in race two and race three. And I just think that, the first half of the season, he's looked really good. Improving every time he's in the car. So yeah, we'll look forward to seeing what the second half of the season holds for Dexter. Most definitely. As for race three, there's been a few drivers that can salvage a good result from a really poor start to the weekend. Ricky Collard is one, and Charles Rainford is another, and they were the top two in this one. Awful qualifying, wasn't it? Let's have a look. I'm trying to remember. Rainford was 8th in Group 2, Collard was dead last in Group 1, and they ended up being P1 and P2 in the third and final race of the weekend. England was third, with Camish fourth, so Camish really, really good. A P1, a P3, and a P4. And Cookie fifth, Robo sixth, great for him, needed that. Just a bit of a confidence boost going into the break. And Chris Smiley, Dexter Patterson, Sutton, and Moffat. This one wasn't without its fireworks as well, of course. Lap one instant, Taylor Smith and Morgan, two drivers who weekend started relatively well. Look at Taylor Smith, obviously on pole for the quali race. And then Morgan's really good performance in the first half of race one until the car gave up on him. And then ATS just loses it all by himself at T1. Morgan, he has to guess, and he guesses the wrong way. Gets collected. They're both in the barriers coming down the avenue, and they're out of the race on the spot. Shedden was out on lap one as well, so a really poor end to the weekend for Laser Tours Racing, where you think they've usually been the drivers that have been on the high at the end of the weekend. We look at Shedden at Snetterton, Taylor Smith at Brands. They've usually ended the weekend on cloud nine. It's the complete opposite with both of them out by the first corner. Tom Chilton in the wars yet again. This is the most instant talk I've had to do for a touring car weekend, I think, but Oulton Park. That is sort of inevitable, I suppose. Chilton in the wars again, and it's the same place as it was for him earlier in the day. This time with Lewis Selby, he's down the inside at Denton's this time. He's learned his lesson from Taylor Smith. He's not trying the outside at Denton's. He tries the inside, and I think Selby doesn't give him a whole heap of room, but Chilton just overcompensates a little bit, goes up the high curb. There's a bit of a clobber there, and he does clobber it, gets a bit out of shape, and has to correct a bit of a moment, and does so into the side of Lewis Selby. Selby was initially understandably miffed to have been wiped out, but then you could see Chilton was explaining it the second they got out of the car. Hits the high curb and he just, big wobble on, and Lewis then puts his arm around him, and all was good. Couple more points before I move on to the championship standings. Rowbottom, yeah, it was a good result in P6, but you could see very clearly especially from the onboard camera, that Mercedes is lacking in a straight line massively. Morgan was doing brilliantly in race one, but right now Robo's car is not on the pace at all. Morgan's been the better of the two across the course of the first half of the year, in my opinion. Roboter won't like that. He won't like that. I mean, Morgan's been in this now for, looking at like 14 years. So he is using every ounce of experience to try and drag a result out of the car. I think it's something that clearly needs to be addressed. David and Tim were picking up on it when we went on board, but picking up the second half of the season now at Thruxton, the fastest circuit on the calendar, where you're 90% flat out for the lap, you've got to get this sorted. And thankfully, the summer break now should hopefully have allowed them to find where it's all gone wrong in a straight line, because the pace just wasn't there. The raw pace of the car in a straight line, it just wasn't there. That needs to be addressed, and I hope they have, because if it hasn't, Thruxton's going to be a miserable weekend for them. So we'll soon see, but hopefully that's all sorted. And final one, just back to Rainford and Collard, the two drivers that have probably impressed me most this season, actually. I think Rainford is a future champion. Give him the tools. I think he's more than good enough to pick up a title one day. And then Ricky Collard is just races his heart out, doesn't he? Heart in his sleeve. Doesn't know when he's beaten and will just push for anything. He will push beyond the car's limits. He will make mistakes. But it's all in love and passion for the sport. And if he's on the grid, then the sport's in a good place. So fingers crossed, he will remain not only for the rest of the season, but for the foreseeable as well. Championship points. Sutton leads Ingram, leads Camish. Ingram and Camish only 12 points separating them, and it's Rainford and Collard in P4 and 5. Again, Collard P5 in the standings. He'd not driven the car pretty much until media. Yeah, in fact, he hadn't until media day. He's doing a phenomenal job. I keep mentioning it, but it's because it is phenomenal. De Leon 6th, Doble 7th, Cook 8th, Shedden 9th, and Moffat 10th. Look at the Jack Sears, and it's Dexter Patterson from James Dorlin, then Sam Osborne, Nick Hamilton, Lewis Selby, and Max Buxton. Obviously, Max Buxton's season has come to an end now, and he's going to be replaced by Ryan Bensley. Teams Championship, Napa lead WSR, lead Virtue, lead Powermax to Laser Tools, and Cataclean, Plato Racing with Restart and Speedworks at the bottom of the pile. Independence, it's Doble from De Leon from Rainford as your top three, with Moffat and Shedden only 1 point separating them. Smiley, Taylor Smith, Patterson, and James Dorlin bringing up the rear. I mean, that's harsh, isn't it? It shows you how good the field is when James Dorlin's bringing up the rear of the Independents. But that is your touring car roundup. Thruxton next. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Let's take a look at the Porsche Sprint Challenge then. And this was the literal definition of a faultless weekend, sublime weekend from Joe Marshall. The River Tools liveried man he just did not put a foot wrong and was quite literally unbeatable. Qualifying on pole, won in race 1, won in race 2, won in race 3, and comfortably in all of them as well. It was absolutely ridiculous from him. Yeah, ominous signs for his competitors. He's already the championship leader, and that was just to cement it even more. Second half of the season now for them, I'd imagine it's going to take quite the misfortune for Marshall not to walk away with the crown come the end of the season. So it was him who took the top step in qualifying. Ethan Hamilton, who's been his closest rival and challenger throughout the first half of the season. Chris Bingham was P3, James Seal P4, so a couple of maybe shock qualifiers there. Dan Lewis P5, Josh Rogers, the sim man in 6th. Then Matt Carlhenny, Sam Harvey, Dean Burden, and Matt Watt. So a couple of drivers struggling there. You can see there's no Dan Zelos in the top 10. Oulton Park is obviously a very challenging circuit. It's very, very technical. It's fast. It's flowing. It's blooming narrow. It is a track that demands inch perfection, really. So Dan Zelos is still. It sounds weird, but he's still going to be getting used to the perts and the quirks of this car. Just his whole career in front wheel drive. I know he had last season, but it doesn't just take a season, I suppose, to come fully to grips with it. And I think that is showing here. Dan is still not quite on the pace. Maybe in qualifying, anyway, he's more competitive in the races, as we'll see here. Going back to Chris Bingham and James Seal, I suppose James Seal has looked racy in many different encounters this season. Chris Bingham, though, with a P3 here, not being rude to Chris, but I don't think there's been anything prior to the Oulton Park weekend that really indicated that this surprise was coming. He's been consistently just knocking on the edge of the top 10, outside of the top 10. But this was a very pleasant surprise to see him P3 on the grid come race 1 on the Saturday. One thing I will say in terms of Chris Bingham is I know there's been a very decent testing program. I've seen many clips of him at Donington Park, courtesy of Pescara Productions and their brilliant testing videos. Chris Bingham was there in a lot of them, so I know that he'd done a very good testing program, at least at that circuit anyway. I'd imagine circuits like Brands Indy, he'd look to optimise some track time there as well. So plenty of time in the car prior to the season. Obviously, he did the couple of latter ends of last season. All of that paying dividends here for this Oulton Park weekend. Just shows you the more time you have in the car, the better you'll get. Let's move on to race 1 then. Joe Marshall, I've already mentioned, won. And it's Josh Rogers in P2, Matt Carl-Henny, Sam Harvey from Dan Lewis, and Reece Summerfield, Felix Livesey, Dan Zelos, Lydia Walmsley, and Chris Bingham in 10th. Already mentioned Zelos struggling there, but obviously P8 is not too bad a result. One man who isn't is Josh Rogers, of course. This is his first season in car racing. All he's done previously is sim racing, and he's made the jump. He was rapid at Donington, and this is absurd. To be this fast, this quick in your career after just a bunch of sim racing. But what it also shows you is how good sim racing is these days. How lifelike it can be, how realistic it is to the actual thing. Obviously, the jump is still, very, very big. I think what sim racing is allowing you to do is quali laps. You can simulate endless and endless quali laps and just driving the track. You pick a track, pick Donington. You could just do endless laps day after day after day. And then on that transition into the real life car, you will know where your braking point is, where you turn. You'll find out that pretty well from sim racing. But one thing it doesn't teach you is racecraft. You can do as many sim races as you like. It doesn't teach you real life racecraft. That, I think, is the big difference for me. But Rogers is still doing fantastically well. I mean, it's not a great deal of wheel-to-wheel combat in Sprint Challenge Great Britain, which I'll talk about in a bit. But it's still very, very impressive from Rogers. Sam Harvey, good result for him as well. Matt Carl-Henny, he gets better every time he's in the car as well. Race upon race, building pace all the time. Lydia Walmsley doing it for the ladies in this one. Again, I spoke a lot in my roundup videos of the coverage and support, backing, and speed that the female drivers are having these days. Lydia Walmsley here with a brilliant top 10. Carrera Cup, obviously, we did have Abby Eaton. I was watching Abby Eaton, actually, at Donington on the weekend in the Fun Cup meeting. She was absolutely mega. She pulled an amazing move. It was about 4 wide into Redgate. She was around the outside and came out on top. She's a proper peddler, is Abby, so I hope she's back in Carrera Cup Great Britain or something of a similar calibre to that in the near future. Race 2 then, the winner. Hamilton in second with Carl-Henny, Seal and Zelos competing in top 5, so good top 5 result there for Dan. Chris Bingham, Felix Livesey, Dan Lewis, Amy Watts and Lydia Walmsley. Now then, mention Marshall, mention Ethan Hamilton. He's always the bridesmaid, never the bride. That's the perfect saying to describe Ethan. I think Jade Edwards might have ushered it. I might have nabbed it off her, actually. But it's the perfect way to put it for Ethan Hamilton. Been in this for, I think, we're looking, is it maybe three seasons now for Ethan? Always been quick, always a top 10, sort of top 5 runner. This year, I mean, if it wasn't for Joe Marshall, he'd have every shot at it. But Marshall is just rapid. He's just absolutely rapid. Hamilton, yeah, he's doing nothing wrong, is the lad. He just needs to find, I think, that bit more bite, bit more grit that Marshall has, and confidence to really make the car dance. I think that's the fine line between Marshall and Hamilton at the minute. Indeed, Marshall and the rest of the field, I should say. Felix Livesey now then. Let's talk about Felix because Janetta Juniors did them for a couple of seasons, watched them, I've watched them for a number of years now. Now this is not being rude to Felix, he was nothing spectacular in the championship, he'll be the first to admit that. He's definitely overshadowed by, the likes of Freddie Slater, Mikey Porter, in recent seasons, Rocco Coronel, Scott Lindblom, likes of them. He was, originally when he first came into the championship, he was more towards the back, which is, as expected to be a rookie. Then gradually worked his way fighting into top 10 and top 5. Never really was the consistent podium contender, though, before moving to the Ginetta GT Championship for this season. Pretty quick in them, I've got to admit. And now coming across to this, and he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. He was making a few really bold lunges at the likes of Lodge Corner. It takes some balls to, dive out at the last moment, really to test where the brakes are going to perform. To get that move done into Lodge, if you get it wrong, you're hitting the guy on your outside in a heartbeat. So he had some great battles, the likes of Dan Zelos throughout most of the weekend. Those two are really, really close running. But he just fitted in right at home. Looked really at home in terms of how he was and equipping himself. Like I said, mentioning Lodge Corner, he was braver on the brakes and a bit more, feisty into some corners than a lot of the established pros at this championship already now. It's only positives for Felix I can take away from this weekend. It really is only positives. I don't think there was much more you could ask for it coming into a championship of GT4 machinery as a rookie, a championship that doesn't have that much overtaking, that much, wheel-to-wheel aggression. It's more about rhythm and capitalising on mistakes. It's patience is massively a virtue in this championship. And Felix was absolutely brilliant. So I really hope we see him throughout the remainder of the season in this championship as well, because I think he was really, really equipping himself well. Final race then, again Marshall and again Ethan Hamilton in P2, and again Matt Card-Henning in P3. Seal 4th and Livesey with the top 5 there in race 3. Then Zelos, Bingham, Lewis, Watson, Walmsley. So what I mentioned about the little overtaking, if we look here, P1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9 and 10 were all the same as it was in race 2. So that does say all. I think I always look forward to the Sprint Challenge races, but it can get a little bit monotonous and almost too settled in, too rhythmic after a bit, especially at a track like Oulton Park, where overtaking requires some creativity, shall we put it that way. Look at the overall championship then, the Club Sport Pro. Marshall leads it to Kyle Henney, to Zelos, to Rogers, to Harvey, to Hamilton. And Oliver Cottonley was absent from Oulton Park. I don't know the reasons why. Then Felix Livesey, there you go. Felix Livesey, 8th in the championship. In front of Chris Bingham, Lydia Walmsley, and Max Watt in his debut meeting. It's made up from Felix, it really is. In terms of Club Sport Am, it's close, but Dan Lewis leads it by 9 points to Reece Summerfield. Then Dean Burden, Amy Watts, James Seal. There's quite a big gap then behind Richard Hosking, Hannah Chapman, and then 2 drivers who I don't think were at Oulton Park. Maybe they were, or they had quiet weekends. Matty Bryars and Will Rochford. I know Rochford definitely wasn't. I can't remember if Bryars was off the top of my head. And then the Club Sport, Gabe Fairbrother takes it from Gracie Mitchell, Mark McKenzie, Giancarlo Romano, and Alistair Weston. Romano and Weston had fantastic battles throughout the course of the weekend. Shows, in this championship, and indeed any championship, drivers are just happy to be on the grid and having a race. It doesn't matter where you are. Those two were fighting for penultimate position of the entire field, and they were going at it hammer and tons like you would up front. It was fantastic to see, and that is another perk of this championship. There will be battles all over the grid. So another good weekend for Porsche Sprint Challenge, but if someone's going to stop Joe Marshall, they're going to have to pounce pretty quickly very, very soon. Mini challenge now then. I'm literally just going to blast through this now because there wasn't many talking points throughout the weekend. Race 1 was not on the broadcast, and race 2 settled into a rhythm pretty quickly. And apart from a little early incident which wasn't caught on camera, yeah, it was pretty mundane for mini standards actually. So I'll talk about qualifying. Josh Porter on pole again. Porter's recent form, particularly in qualifying, has been exceptional. But he's just had the most rotten of luck, which we'll come on to in a minute. Sam Dornell was hot on his heels though, and Joe Tanner nearly front row Joe, nearly able to say front row Joe there in P3. Alex Solly, Tom Ovenden, Charlie Hand, Max Edmondson, Algieri, and then Johnson and Howarth inseparable again. Race 1, Porter was leading, but then a DNF strikes and Dornell took the win. Tanner second, front row Joe, and then it's Tom Ovenden, Charlie Hand, Archie Johnson fifth, good result for him, really good. And Algieri, Cammy Richardson, Max Edmondson, Harry Campy, and Ned Anthony completed your top 10 for that one. Race 2, and it was Sam Dornell again. Now this was, I couldn't believe the cameras didn't pick this up. This is the battle for the lead. I couldn't believe the camera didn't get this. Bottom of the hill, exit of the chicane, Knickerbrook coming up Clay Hill. Porter's run a little bit wide, so Dornell sticks his nose down the inside and they just come together on it. So it is a racing instant, but Porter ends up spat out as he overcorrects the slide into the tyres. He might have rolled as well. It's hard to tell just looking at the static. There was a window shattered, I think. It looked pretty beaten up, the car, so there's every chance it went over it sideways into the gravel. I am not sure. So yeah, Dornell inherited the win after there was no steward action. Charlie Hand second with Joe Tanner third. It's just good to see Joe Tanner back up the sharp end, obviously. A couple of years out the minis now, returning with Napa. Yeah, Joe Tanner is a top man, so it's good to see him back up the front. Tom Ovenden, not quite the 5-star weekend that he's been used to recently. Then Henry Howarth, Alex Solly, Algieri, Richardson, Johnson, and Nathan Edwards top 10. It's just not clicking again for Nathan, is it, this year? Something, I don't know. Can't put my finger on it. I don't know whether he can either. Mixture of luck. I don't know, maybe a bit of confidence as well. It's just not happening for him. Championship, though, and it is Ovenden from Edmondson, then Dornell, Algieri, Hand, Solly, Hitterton, Campy, Edwards, and Porter. I don't understand. Porter's he's had like, I think he's might have even taken the last 3 pole positions, something like that. No, sorry. Of course, Brands had taken off him. So he had that taken off him, and he put it on pole at Snetterton, and he put it on pole at Oulton Park as well. So it's technically is 3 poles in a row. And he's 10th in the championship because the races just are unfolding so unfortunately for him, particularly Oulton Park. Yeah, Snetterton was a pretty faultless weekend for him. But yeah, just poor Josh. You got to feel for the lad. And then I said again, Nathan Edwards, he's just struggling. Something's just not clicking for him. Charlie Hand, Alex Solly, 2 drivers that I'm really happy to see. P5 and P6 getting some good results out of the season. But with that, I'm going to end it there. Like I said, with the mini race, wasn't much to talk about in terms of overtaking and action besides the incident, which I briefly mentioned. Obviously, they won't be with us at Thruxton. They will return at Knock Hill. We'll look forward to having the Mini Coopers as well as the Mini Midleys and Mini Sevens. And keep an eye out for some commentary. I'm thinking of doing some commentary for the touring car weekend if I can figure out a way to maybe avoid copyright. I might have to. I'll see how it goes. It might just be me talking without the actual footage along the bottom, which wouldn't be great to watch. I understand, but nonetheless, we shall see. So thanks for watching, guys, and again, please like and subscribe and drop a comment, and I will get back to you. Any thoughts on the weekend? Any video suggestions? Just anything really. Any comments you have, let me know. I'll get back to you. And until then, guys, thank you. Stay tuned for the next one.